I'd like to look in the mirror without hiding my eyes. I'd like to see what you see, why you think I'm qualified to speak for you, oh God, Most High, who hides a baby in the reeds of a river until he's grown, gives him a stage and the strength to deliver his people home. 'Cause I'm tongue-tied, weak in the knees, must be something you only see if there's
Welcome to Wednesday Night's Bible Study. My name is Philip, and this is Seth Parnell.
Hey there.
And if you've watched for a long time, you know how this works. I've studied. He's just here for a knee-jerk reaction for conversation purposes. And so it's not that he's never read Exodus.
I don't know. Have I?
You better have. Yeah, by this point in time, you should have. Or at least referred to it somewhere in Scripture.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually a story that is repeated more often than any other story in the Bible. Yeah, it's repeated in the Psalms, it's repeated in the historical narratives, it's repeated in the prophets, it's repeated in the New Testament. I mean, it's all the way through, the story is.
Yeah.
It's a foundational story. Moses, Exodus.
So I've come across it.
Yeah, so you've at least know something about it, right? So we're in Exodus chapter 5. So if you'll turn there, that's right after Genesis. Right after
book.
Genesis, the second book of the Bible.
5th chapter.
And of course, I'm wearing my Wake Forest shirt today.
Of course.
Yeah, the ACC tournament starts tomorrow, and I think that they're actually in it. So we don't know if they'll win it, but I'm wearing my Wake Forest thing.
They have a shot.
They do have a
They
shot.
have a shot.
The problem is Duke.
Aren't they always?
The problem, no, they're not. But this year, that's the problem. Duke will have to be beat by somebody else.
NC State.
Yeah, no, NC State's not even in it.
In my mind, they are.
They're not. They're not. They're the bottom three, and they did not get in. And then there's play-ins, and then for somebody that doesn't do sports a lot, I know a lot about these tournaments.
You're all about March Madness.
I'm all about March Madness.
Some college basketball.
That's right. Okay. Chapter 5 of Exodus starts after some encouraging meeting with the elders of the children of Israel. They are excited. They are expecting great things for God to do. And so Aaron and Moses leaves that meeting to go see Pharaoh. Now, we don't know how much time has passed between the time they met and the time they're going to meet Pharaoh. But we do know they're on their way. And we also know that the elders went with them. So as we're reading through this text, it's going to reference Moses and Aaron a lot because they're the speakers. But what we need to understand is that Moses and Aaron did not go alone for this meeting. The elders of the children of Israel were also with them as well. Okay. So verse 1 says, "Afterwards Moses and Aaron went and said to Pharaoh, 'Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness.'" Couple things about this. First of all, Moses asking Pharaoh to let the Jews go represents a huge workforce in Egypt. So they are requesting that all the stuff that's being developed in the country would stop for a certain amount of time so that all these people could go outside of Egypt 3 days, worship God for ever how long that is, and then come back. So productivity in Egypt would come to a grinding halt.
Yeah. Government shutdown.
Government shutdown, or definitely the roads are not going to be worked on. The The palaces are not going to be worked on. The pyramids, if they're doing that, is not going to be worked on. Whatever they're making brick for, whatever they're building, is not going to be worked on during this time. So this is a major thing. I think a lot of people read this passage as, let my people go. And Pharaoh should have said, yeah, sure, I'll do that. But there's more going on than just allowing a small group of people go on vacation. This is this will have major impact if Pharaoh was to say yes.
They're valuable to him.
Very valuable. Very valuable. Another thing about this verse that's beyond the request and the impact of that request on their culture is this. It says, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go. They are coming to him, telling him, this is what God has told you to do. God has told us to tell you to let his people go. This is a slap in the face to Pharaoh's authority because they are not asking if he will let them go. He is saying that God is demanding that Pharaoh let his people go. And Pharaoh thinks that he's a god. He thinks that he's a representation of God on earth. He thinks that all the other gods that are in Egypt are actually lower than he is. He believes that he is the supreme godlike commander during this period of time and that he's the most powerful being. So in his eyes, the God of the Jews was below him. So how could this God be so cocky, if you will, as to make this statement to him? And then why would he even do it? Because he doesn't even really know this particular God. He knows the rest of them, but he hasn't taken the time to figure out who Yahweh is, the God of the slaves, of his servants. This thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, is actually an Egyptian idiom. It's how they would say, thus says Ra, the God of, or thus says whatever other gods they have. I forget the names of their gods right now, but they would use that to say, this is what Ra says, this is what this God says, he says to do this. So Moses and Aaron uses their terminology to say what Yahweh wants. Yeah, so it's not out of the ordinary. Another thing about this verse, there's a lot in here, obviously. The God of Israel, this is the first time that particular phrase is used in the Bible.
Oh, wow.
It's, Job was the first book that was ever written. Never used there. It's not used in Genesis, but it's used here in chapter 5 for the very first time. That's a neat little thing. The next phrase, let my people go, conveys the idea of a person who is being dismissed from one zone of authority because a higher zone of authority has commanded it to be so. So let them go. In other words, Yahweh is saying, I'm a higher authority than you are. Now, this has a lot of implications. This is basically the God of the Jews not only saying that he is far above Pharaoh, but that the God of the Jews is now saying, you've used my people long enough and you're not going to use them any longer. So let them go. They're now under my authority. This also shows us that there's two claims on Israel. Pharaoh claims that Israel is under him. The people of Israel is under him. Yahweh is claiming that the children of Israel is under his authority. So now we have two authorities going at each other, head to head.
Right.
Is what's happening. So whose people are they? Are they Pharaoh's people or are they Yahweh's people? And I know you have an answer to that. I know the people listening have an answer to that. But in this time, that's what Pharaoh is faced with. This is an identity sort of thing. If Pharaoh lets the people go and responds to this, he is saying that the Jews are God's people and are no longer under the jurisdiction of Egypt. That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
I'm responding to the commands of this God to let his people go, and now those people are his people and not my people.
So he has to take a stance.
He has to take a stance. So what do you think about all that? That was a lot within one verse.
Yeah. The the whole thing about Pharaoh thinking, who is this God to challenge me?
Yeah.
You know, they're my people. Even if you worship a God, like, you're under me, is what Pharaoh's thinking. And then we know, because, you know, believe it or not, I have read Exodus.
Yeah.
We know there's going to be a battle
Yeah.
with the plagues and everything. But, you know, Pharaoh's not, he doesn't know that yet.
Yeah. So let's capitalize on that. Who is this God? Because that is actually said in verse 2. But Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and moreover, I will not let Israel go." So keep in mind, he thought he was a supreme being. He did. And what Pharaoh does here, however, in his statement, is he presents the question that is going to be answered in the coming days. It's going to be answered with the plagues. It's going to be answered at the Red Sea. And in fact, it's going to go beyond that to be answered at the mountain where they received the law. So who is the Lord? And everything that happens from this point on is God demonstrating who he is to Pharaoh. God answering that question, demonstrating who he really is to the Egyptian people. And God demonstrating who he is to his chosen people as well. This is who I am. I am the God, the supreme God, and there's no one else besides me.
Yeah.
So he's going to knock down every single belief system and just leave it really in shambles by the time at least the Red Sea hits.
Yeah. Wow.
And even when the Israelites, spoiler alert, resurrect a false god in the wilderness, he immediately shuts that down too as well. Yeah. So
He's the one true prime God.
yeah, one true. Life in Egypt was based on having the right relationship with Pharaoh. It was based on recognizing his authority and acting in accordance with his requirements. To be a follower of God, Yahweh, right? You have to have the right relationship with God. You have to recognize his authority, and you have to act in accordance with his requirements. So that is another way that we know that Pharaoh really thought he was God too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and had the same privileges as God.
Yeah. He was walking on really murky waters, right?
Murky waters. Verse 3. Then they said, and that is somebody, "The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Please let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord your God, lest he fall upon us with pestilence or with the sword." So this verse can be looked at in several different ways. One, the they can go back to Aaron and Moses, in which maybe Aaron and Moses were shocked that Pharaoh didn't say you can go, or they were shocked at his response because it wasn't a nice response. And so here they're losing some of their nerve. So they change to a testimony coming from themselves. So they start with, this is what God has said, and they are saying, this is what we are saying. The other way to take this verse is because we know that the other elders are with Moses and Aaron, is maybe they stepped forward and said, the God of the Hebrews has met with us. Us meaning all of us. Please let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord your God, lest he fall upon us with a pestilence or with the sword. So I tend to lean that this is the elders of Israel speaking at this point, rather than Moses and Aaron. So let's take it both ways. If it was Moses and Aaron, the pestilence and the sword might have to do with Moses, and last week he had to circumcise one of his sons or he would have died. So he had a plague, and his wife had to circumcise the son in order to save his life, is part of the passage. If it is the elders, they are saying he's met with us and he's going to be true to his word, and we fear that all of us will be marked with the plague, and he'll take some of us out. So please let us go so that we can appease him. And I do think that it is the elders that are talking here.
It makes sense because Moses and Aaron first come very boldly, let the people go, and then whoever they is more subservient, like please let us go,
because they are the slaves. And the response of Pharaoh tends to go with that viewpoint. Verse 4 says, "But the king of Egypt said to them," then he addresses Moses and Aaron, "Why do you take the people away from their work?" Then he switches who he's actually talking to, and he tells the other people that are with them to get back to your burdens. Right. See, Moses didn't have any burdens. He hadn't been there. Aaron, maybe he was too old. He's over 80 years old. Maybe there's a point in which you can't do the works, but these elders here could. And so get back to your burdens is what he says. So he addresses them both. Yeah. Kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, that is. Yeah. Oddly worded, but that makes sense.
Yeah, the way that wrote down. Yeah. Let us go 3 days journey in verse 3 is a outside of the realm of Egyptian control. So we've said that before in the study, but here Pharaoh is thinking about all this. Pharaoh is also thinking about that he has a rebellion on his hands. So that's how he's taking this. So yeah, he believes that he's God, but also he's thinking in terms of government. He's thinking in terms of control. He's thinking in terms of bureaucracy. He's thinking in terms of economics. He's thinking in terms of safety in general, to keep these projects going. So he doesn't want a rebellion within his kingdom at this time.
Wasn't, going back to Exodus, I guess 1, wasn't it a 3 days journey to get rid of all the firstborn of the Hebrews? Or the babies? Wasn't it a 3 day journey to...
Well, yeah, so...
But maybe that hasn't had anything to do...
It doesn't, but you're right. The river, if you live beside the river, you're probably more concerned with babies being thrown in than if you live 3 days... Because some of the Jews live a 3 days journey from the river, so you'd have to take them. I don't know if there's any parallel here, but I can see how you would think about that.
Yeah,
that's good thinking, Seth.
3 days.
That's good. That's a good throwback for people.
Jesus was in the grave for 3 days?
Oh no, absolutely not.
He wasn't?
No, this isn't what this is talking about. Yeah. All right. So let's see. Taken away in verse 4. Take the people away from their work is actually a phrase that means running wild and out of control. The next time that word is used is in Exodus 32 with the golden calf. And the people had ran wild and were out of control worshiping this golden calf. So that's the next time we will see that particular word. So he's saying... obviously, these people are running wild and they think they can do anything they want. Yeah. I do need to pause here a moment to say, if Pharaoh had granted the request, he was also giving the Israelite people their freedom. Because now they're under Yahweh and not him. And so he could have lost a whole workforce in that granting. So he's got the weight of the nation on his shoulders, and he's trying to keep everything in order. So what happens? Verse 6, the same day, Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters of the people and their foremen, "You shall no longer give the people straw to make bricks, as in the past. Let them go and gather straw for themselves." So Pharaoh is going to... exert some power here to keep things in control. That's precisely what he is trying to do. And it's interesting here that you have taskmasters, which are Egyptians, and then you have foremen that are Jews. And the foremen are over the Jewish workforce. Probably because the Egyptians did not understand the Jews' language. So the foremen were bilingual. They understood the Egyptian language, they understood the Hebrew language, and they could, do that job.
Gotcha.
The foreman position was a coveted position. Like, what would you rather do? Make the brick or be in charge of the people making the brick?
Right.
I mean, which would you rather be?
Yeah.
You're still a slave, but I would rather do that than make the brick.
Less burdensome.
That level. So that's why he did it that particular way. So it went from the what does it say, taskmasters to the foremen to the people. That's how that's working out. You shall no longer give the people straw to make bricks, as in the past. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. That particular word for straw is actually stubble. So you would cut straw in a field and you would leave a little bit in the field. That portion is what they used for brick. So they would have to pick that up. So that's a little harder to harvest, really, or get for the brick than the big stuff that you could just cut down and take a big heap of it in your arms to wherever you needed to go. You have to actually pull this up and probably do a few other things before you can get it to the brick. Yeah. All right, verse 8. But the number of bricks that they made in the past you shall impose on them. You shall by no means reduce it, for they are what? Idle. That particular word idle means lazy. Therefore they cry, let us go and offer sacrifice to our God. Obviously they think that they have a lot of time on their hands, so we're going to make sure they don't. We're going to make sure that they're so busy that they will never ask this question again. At all. And so that's what he does. So it's a power move. What Pharaoh doesn't realize in this moment, that he is facing a situation that cannot be resolved by force. He's going to come with all his power. But then what's going to happen is God's going to come with all of his.
Yeah.
And so an act of force isn't going to resolve this issue. An act of humbling your heart before the one true God would resolve the issue. And God would bless you for that. But he's not going to do that. So we also see here that he's already against doing this. So Pharaoh has already hardened his own heart at this point toward all of this. And his pride has taken over, or his fear of the children of Israel revolting. And he's trying to maintain control in his country. I can't blame him for that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole time I had that thought of, it's easy to be like, yo, Pharaoh, he's hard and blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, he just randomly has this guy come up. Well, he's Moses, not a random guy.
Yeah.
But come up and say, let all these people go. Well, I'm not going to say yes.
Yeah. Do you not realize the impact of that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you need to give me some more evidence for me to be like, oh, yeah, it's a good idea.
Right. Yeah. And I don't even know your God. So, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Verse 9. Let heavier work be laid on the men, that they may labor at it and pay no regard to lying words. So he's saying that the words of Aaron and Moses and the elders, they are lying. And so he's hoping that with the increased amount of work, that the people will turn against the elders and turn against their leadership, and they will see that there's no way that they will ever be let go, and that God did not tell Aaron and Moses anything, because this is what's happening. So he's trying to, in a very real way, show that God's not going to work this out the way that Aaron and Moses said he's going to work it out. And it's going to make them look like liars.
Yeah.
That's what he's trying to do. So verse 10, so the taskmasters and the foremen of the people went out, and they said to the people, thus says Pharaoh, I will not give you straw. Go and get your straw yourselves, whether you can find it. But your work will not be reduced in the least. So the people were scattered throughout all the land of Egypt to gather stubble for straw. And the taskmasters were urgent, saying, complete your work, your daily task each day, as when there was straw. and the foremen of the people of Israel, whom Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten and were asked, "Why have you not done all your task of making bricks today and yesterday as in the past? Why are you not meeting the quota?" So now you have foremen in that coveted position, and they're being beaten, not the slaves. The foremen are being beaten because they're not meeting their quota. I know that this happens in companies, not the beating portion of it, but there's quotas that you have to reach. My son works at Food Lion, and there's a certain amount of quotas that they have to meet. And if one department doesn't meet a particular quota, then this department shares, I don't know how it all works, shares so that they can meet the quotas that corporate has sent down to them for that one store. And it's more complicated than that, but I'm just telling you, this is a common business practice. Yeah. So, but in this case, that's unlike Food Lion. Food Lion has hired employees. This was slaves. And so if a slave doesn't do work, you don't dock their pay, you beat them. Yeah. That's what you do. And
motivate them.
I think the reason that the slaves were not beaten is because the foremen would not beat the slaves. So they took the beatings for them.
Wow.
Is what was happening. So it is we've got just a little more intense.
Yeah.
Before we move on to the next couple of verses, I did want to point out, so the taskmasters and the foremen of the people went out and said to the people, "Thus says Pharaoh," because that is a Egyptian idiom that says, this is what the God is telling you to do.
Yeah, wow.
So now we have, "Thus says Pharaoh," in parallel with "Thus says Yahweh" in this moment. And that's where the tension is.
Yeah.
Which one of those is going to win out? Yeah. So verse 15, "Then the foreman of the people of Israel came out and cried to Pharaoh, 'Why do you treat your servants like this?'" Now this is the foreman, not the taskmasters. "No straw is given to your servants, yet they say to us, 'Make bricks,' and behold, your servants are beaten, but the fault is in your own people." So the foreman might not realize this. I don't know what they're thinking here, going to Pharaoh. Maybe they did hear that Pharaoh said to do this from the taskmasters, and they are appealing to him to change his mind, but laying the blame for not meeting the quotas on the taskmasters, because this is unreasonable, is what they're saying. And that might have been a smart way to do it. I do think it's interesting that they made a petition to him and they didn't pray before they went to him. I do think that's interesting. So it's almost like I don't know. I don't want to say that they think he's a god, but at the same time, they're treating him that way.
Well, he has evident power over their life.
Right.
Whereas God has ultimate power, but they see the terror that Pharaoh is going to bring to them.
But there's an absence of praying to God before they even go to Pharaoh.
Yeah.
And they make a petition much like a prayer, really. Verse 17, "But he said, 'You are idle, you are idle.' In other words, you're lazy, you're lazy. That is why you say, 'Let us go and sacrifice to the Lord.'" So he's throwing that into their faces. And he's reminding them who they say their God is. And I must be more powerful because he's not able to help you do what he wants you to do. So verse 18, "Go now and work. No straw will be given to you, but you must still deliver the same number of bricks." Now Pharaoh knows what's going to happen. He knows that these foremen are going to go back and they are going to press the leaders of the people. Okay? So let me pause here a moment to kind of give you a structure. You have Pharaoh, who is a power of government, a governmental power, right? And you have his structure. Then you have representatives for his slave workforce. That would be the elders of the people. That would be them, just in general. So they are over the governance of the slaves under Pharaoh, but they're put in charge of governing that nation. So Pharaoh has put into motion these foremen going back to the leaders so that the Hebrew people might kick the leadership out and replace the leadership. So that something might change to where the slaves are more apt to do what he wants them to do. And I think in his mind, he's going to relieve some of this, some of what he says, but he's going to let this work. It is a chess match to gain power and to get them to submit to him, is what this is. Does that make sense?
It does, yep.
Yeah. So verse 18, right? Go now and work. No straw will be given to you, but you must still deliver the same number of bricks. Verse 19, the foremen of the people of Israel saw that they were in trouble when they said, you shall by no means reduce your number of bricks, your daily task each day. We are in trouble because we're not going to reach that quota, and we are going to be beaten every single day because there's no way we can meet this. So they're now concerned for their own lives and their own well-being. Okay. So verse 20, they met Moses and Aaron, who were waiting for them as they came out from Pharaoh. And they said to them, the Lord look on you and judge, because you have made us stink in the sight of Pharaoh and his servants, and have put a sword in their hand to kill us. So they are basically saying the Lord's going to be your judge because you did this to us. You made this happen. This is the result of you meeting with Pharaoh and it not going well. So Moses did not take this very well. And we have to remember his history. The first time he tried to do this, it didn't go well either. And he was met with resistance. Now this resistance is really on a different level. There's a lot of foremen. And these are leaders in the community. You have elders, you have foremen. Okay? These foremen are over the workforce, and everybody looks up to them and respects them at some level. So they're coming at Aaron and Moses. And Moses, I think, is just heartbroken and a little concerned about this, that this is not working out. And so he's a little bit bewildered. And so in verse 22, it says, then Moses turned to the Lord. And that's the word Adonai, by the way. And he says, O Lord, why have you done evil to this people? Why did you ever send me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people, and you have not delivered your people at all. This is not even moving us toward the goal line, it seems. We seem to have taken one step forward and 3 steps back. Or maybe 1 step forward and 20 steps back.
Yeah.
This is just not working. And this is a point in time where Moses is like, I don't understand why this is happening. And that's where the chapter ends.
Uplifting.
Uplifting.
Encouraging.
I am going to say this. Chapter 6, verse 1. But the Lord said to Moses, now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh, for with a strong hand he will send them out. With a strong hand he will drive them out of his land. I'm just going to say this, that I don't think that is necessarily the answer that Moses wanted, because he wanted some positive momentum at this point. That does not give positive momentum, and that is no different than what God has said to him before. Sometimes faith is realizing that you're moving ahead for God and things have gotten worse, but you're going to continue to move ahead for God with what he's called you to do, even though the days are getting darker and darker and darker and darker.
Yeah.
Sometimes faith is crying out to God to say, why isn't this working out? I'm still going to remain faithful to you. I'm still going to take these steps forward to do what you've called me to do. But man, I'm having a difficult time accomplishing this at this moment because there's no positive momentum. And I need that positive momentum to continue to go forward.
Yeah.
And so I think it's neat that, first of all, this is very human. We've all been here at some level. Sometimes we are bewildered with what's happening with us. But the lesson here is that we stick with it because we're called to do something. And God, instead of immediately saying, oh, I'm sorry, let me change things for you immediately, he just reminds Moses of his promise.
Yeah.
And sometimes the thing that keeps us going when things are getting worse is the promises of God,
Yeah.
not the circumstances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. That's
So-
really good.
So there you go.
I like it.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we end, last week, I told Grayson that at this pace, instead of 80 Bible studies, we would have 78 Bible studies.
Okay.
Okay. This week we're at part 7 and is that right? Part 7 and we're in chapter 5. So we're still on track to do, actually we're on track to do 67 Bible studies now. Instead of 77 Bible studies now instead of 78.
Wow.
So Grayson made a prediction. He's trying to get out of it, but he made a prediction that at this current pace, we will have 60 Bible studies by the time this is all over.
Okay.
Are you prepared today to predict how many studies that we're going to have so that we can check it at the very end?
Can I get a pen and some paper?
Just to try to figure some of this out?
Yeah. Let's say...
He says 60. Mm-hmm. You know.
And you're saying 77?
Well,
Or
I'm
at this pace?
just literally, like, now that we have done part 7 and we did all of chapter 5, it is now down to 77. Mm-hmm. So because it's based, that 80 is based on 2 per chapter.
Right.
So that's how it's going. So it's part 7 and we're in chapter 5. Is that right? Let me make sure. Yeah, part 7, chapter 5. So...
And we just did one whole chapter.
Yeah. And we had to do that whole chapter, you know.
I'm still going to say based off of Mark. Mm-hmm. Because once we got into Mark, it was like, yeah, I'll finish this chapter. And then I was like, nope, we're going to break this chapter up into 3. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say it's going to be longer than 60.
Okay. So what number would that be? 'Cause now we know that the hitting mark will be 77. Right, and we know that there's going to be some chapters that we do the whole chapter on.
So from here, it's 77 if we did 2 every...
Yeah, if we did 2 every time, it would be 77.
So there's some other outside factors. Mm-hmm. And the one outside factor is you like to mix things up. And so I don't think you would ever cut anything short or cheat anyone. Mm-hmm. But you may not be as excited you just want to get it finished, maybe. Mm-hmm.
But I have breaks.
You do, okay.
See, the problem with this, I have a whole summer break.
Okay.
And then I have a winter break.
And you're not
in December.
Taking into account any of the breaks.
Yeah.
So this is just Bible studies that are just in Exodus.
So, this fall we're going to start with some part.
Okay, so that breathes fresh air. So we're back at the possibility of 77.
77, yeah. It's possibility of 77.
I'm just going to say, I mean, that's almost the perfect number, 77.
You're going to keep...
I might...
I don't think it's smart to keep 77.
Yeah, I think I might, though.
Okay, keep 77. All right, I'm going to put it down. I've got it in the back of my Bible right here, in the back of Exodus. See, Grayson says 60 parts of this study, and on the back I'm going to put Seth.
I'm going to say 77.
77, all right.
Based off of all those factors.
Yeah. It's just to create some interest in the Bible study, just to see what happens.
Let's see.
All right, that said, grace and peace. See you next week.